Good morning, everybody. My name's James. I'm Chief Economist at IGD, and I'm here today with one of my colleagues, Nicola, who is one of our Insights managers. And I should probably start off by saying thank you so much for having us here today. It is a real privilege to be a part of HRC once again. If we haven't met before, I should probably take just a few moments to introduce IGD and tell you who we are, what we're all about. So IGD is actually two organizations. We have Commercial Insight, we have Social Impact. So Commercial Insight, which is where Nicola mostly works, that's all about creating actionable information solutions for food and grocery businesses. So we do events, we have website subscription services, we offer customized research for those people who need it. And all of that work raises revenue to support Social Impact. That's the charity organisation, which is where I mostly sit. And we have a number of social impact programs at the moment looking at all of the issues that the food industry shares. Things like nutrition, sustainability, people, and economics. We work with practitioners, we work with people just like you to make sure that everything that we produce really is actionable and practical in the real world. Now, if we have met before, there's a good chance it was actually at the last HRC event, which was about a year ago. And I had a chance to speak alongside another colleague called Rianne. And at that time, I described a UK hospitality industry that was actually amazingly robust and amazingly resilient. Hospitality was really bouncing back after that dreadful blow that COVID inflicted on it. Yes, businesses were facing a whole range of different challenges, but they weren't moribund, they weren't inert. In fact, they were dynamic. And Rianne showed us some of the ways that they were evolving in response to all of those pressures. Now, a lot of the points that we discussed back then, I think, are actually still relevant today, 1 year later. But an awful lot of things have changed since the last event. And for once, a lot of those changes have actually been quite positive. And in fact, I think we now have reasons for cautious optimism about the future of UK hospitality. I think this is now the point where we need to start pivoting away from managing turmoil and crisis and moving towards planning for a much more successful future. So today, my job is all about talking about the current situation in the UK and around the world, and then Nicola's going to come on and bring together a few learnings from around the world to help us as we plan for that better future. So, why are we feeling a bit more optimistic right now? Well, I think that there are three reasons for greater optimism: supply chain improvement, commodity price improvement, and the resilience of consumer demand. Although, as always, we will balance those against a few caveats and a few watch-outs. The first reason I think for greater optimism is that we're seeing a lot more clarity around some of those strategic issues, particularly around logistics. Global supply chain problems that emerged over the last couple of years, now mostly resolved, and more importantly for us in the UK, a lot of the uncertainty around the way we're going to manage the borders is starting to clear up. So after months of talks, we now have the new Windsor framework, which is going to replace the Northern Ireland Protocol, which was definitely very, very problematic. The protocol was honestly a bit of a dog's breakfast. It was a compromise that didn't really please anybody and certainly didn't please the hospitality industry. The Windsor framework is intended to address at least some of those problems. Now, if we're honest, there's probably no ideal way to serve food demand in Northern Ireland now that we are outside of the EU. But the new solution, the red lane, green lane solution, does look like being much, much better than where we are now. Now, I've read the framework very carefully. I read it so you don't have to. And I've emerged feeling actually quite upbeat about what the future might hold. If it works, I think that this will resolve one of the key strategic issues that hospitality has been facing over the last couple of years. Now, of course, there are a lot of barriers to overcome, and certainly there's a political problem there. politics in Northern Ireland always incredibly complicated, and an awful lot depends on the way that officials are going to work with businesses to operationalise the new framework. But I think what we have here is what you might call a 70% solution. If 100% solution is just like being back in the EU, the Windsor framework is 70% of that. It will eliminate a lot of the administrative headaches that food businesses have in terms of moving food out of GB and into Northern Ireland. And better still, unlike the Northern Ireland Protocol, the Windsor framework is open to hospitality and to food service. So that is obviously a huge plus for an audience like this one. Alas, there are issues too. And probably the biggest issue that we've got is around making sure that goods stay where they are put and they don't leak out of Northern Ireland and into the Republic of Ireland. And that's going to be a real challenge, particularly for those businesses that operate on both sides of the borders. And of course, that does include big names, people like Premier Inn, McDonald's, and lots of the other high street operators that you can think of. Now, the EU has made a lot of concessions to deliver the Windsor framework, and they're going to be looking to make sure that the framework is not being abused. And we can actually make the same point about the UK government as well. The UK government has put a lot of effort into answering the problems that the food supply chain has raised. So again, they are going to want to make sure that we are engaging with the new system when it finally arrives. Looking further ahead, more work coming up on borders and movements. We're expecting to get some clarity very soon on something called TOM. TOM is the Target Operating Model, and it's a scheme that will modernise the way that we work our borders, applying to all imports, not just imports from the EU, but imports from around the world. Now, it is intended to make administration much easier, which is great, but adapting to it is going to require a lot of effort for anybody who is moving goods into the UK. And although it will streamline the admin, what it won't do is take away the legal obligations. So the legal obligations around things like origins, SPS checks, health checks, all of that stuff, those will still remain very, very strict. Now, we know that pretty much every UK hospitality business is heavily reliant on food and drink brought in from overseas. So Tom, absolutely worth keeping an eye on. And even if your business isn't importing directly, the chances are that somebody within your supply chain really does. So get onto your suppliers, talk to them about Tom, and make sure that they are ready as soon as the detail arrives. So that's our first reason for optimism. Second reason for optimism is around commodity prices. Energy prices now well below where they were this time last year, although still above where they were pre-COVID. Global food prices, very high still, but at least they have leveled off. They have stabilized to some degree. And we know that governments and banks around the world actively involved in trying to manage inflation downwards. So that should help to take at least some of the sting out of inflation as we move through 2023. Now, we at IGD think that commodity prices are going to fade as 2023 goes on and into 2024, assuming nothing else goes wrong. But lower inflation is not necessarily the same thing as negative inflation. And I think hardship and high costs are going to remain an issue for a lot of us until prices really come down and stay down. As always, when we look at these commodity markets, there are a lot of moving parts, a lot of uncertainties, and energy is probably the hardest one for any of us to call. The market is still badly disrupted by war, so war outcome is obviously one of the key factors we would be looking at. But another point to watch out for here is the economic path taken by big energy consumers, people like China and India. So as China comes out of COVID and moves into recovery, there is a good chance it's going to re-emerge onto the global market as a huge energy buyer. And of course, that might well push prices back up again. And closer to home, of course, we have those issues around government support for energy costs. And Kate already referred to the need for more clarity on where we're going with support for businesses. Modern food businesses, of course, incredibly energy intensive. And there's a huge overlap between food and energy. It takes about 7 calories of fossil fuels to deliver 1 calorie of food onto your plate as a consumer. So of course, while energy prices are high, food prices are also high. But global food markets are affected by an awful lot of other factors as well, particularly weather. Now, we had a dry year last year. This year also looks like being a dry year. It's a La Nina year for Europe. So that might well mean lower rainfall, higher temperatures, and impacted food yields. But farm business planning also incredibly important. Most farmers, I'm sure, have already decided what it is that they're going to be doing this year. Hopefully, they will have made those decisions in connection with the partners that they work with. And that would certainly be the case for an integrated supply chain like McDonald's has, for example. But the recent furore over things like salad supply can definitely show us what happens when those discussions, when those joint planning exercises start to break down. The third major reason for being optimistic is, well, as Kate said, hospitality demand in the UK has been incredibly robust in 2022, with all of the market outcomes actually surprising us on the upside. So in our research, when we were talking to consumers, they were telling us consistently, we're going to cut back our spending on eating out. But in fact, that hasn't actually happened. In reality, market performance was actually pretty strong. And the losses that were suffered during COVID do now seem to have come back. They've been clawed back. That might well mean that our consumers are actually much more reluctant to reduce their eating out spend than they think that they are. Or perhaps it tells us that the businesses in this market are really, really effective in driving demand, even when times are hard. But although this is incredibly promising, again, there are provisos that apply. Certainly it wasn't easy, and I use the term clawed back very, very deliberately, because businesses really had to fight for this recovery. The recovery hasn't been uniform, and certainly the London market is still quite depressed, we think. And of course, as Kate said, inflation did deliver an awful lot of that recovery. So as we move on to the caveats, I want to think a little bit more about inflation. Inflation dynamics are the first of the watch outs I want to give to you. So on this chart here, we're looking at the way that inflation has performed in accommodation and eating out over the course of the last couple of years. And you can see that accommodation and eating out have seen strengthening inflation over the course of the last year. So as much as a third of the sales growth that Kate was talking about in her piece has been delivered by inflation and not by volume. It's coming from higher prices, not necessarily from serving more meals or more rooms to our consumers. And therefore, the value growth doesn't necessarily mean that volume and profit have come back. And in fact, for a lot of operators, we know that the costs are still running well ahead of where they would want them. Energy bills, obviously front of mind for a lot of people, but the energy bills are just the front end of a whole series of rising costs. Taxes, wages, and compliance should all be on the agenda. The future path that inflation takes is obviously critical as far as businesses are concerned. The good news is I do think we're coming to the end of this upward movement in inflation. At some point, probably quite soon, it will top off and start to slow down. And if you're a hospitality operator, you've got to have a view on what that means. Because at some point, and probably quite soon, you're going to have to move from price change to volume as the major growth driver. And margins will have to be rebuilt. Now, certainly, that's a view that hospitality operators are going to have to take. But of course, manufacturers, the people serving this market, also have to have a view on inflation. Because a lot of them have still got historical cost increases that they have to pass on. So this next chart, there we go. And by the way, all of the charts will be available for download. It is a very small screen, I apologise. But this chart shows you the inflation position for UK food manufacturers. The purple line is manufacturer cost. The orange line is prices at the factory gate. So if you follow the orange line, you can see that yes, food manufacturers are able to charge more to the retailers and food service operators that they serve. Great. But the prices at the factory gate have not kept up with cost. The two lines move apart, and therefore relentless margin on relentless pressure on manufacturer margins. Those cost changes have not yet been passed on down the supply chain in full. And this is probably the biggest argument that you could expect to see coming in food service over the next couple of years. At what point will those cost changes be completed? Because as we move into a less inflationary marketplace, the commercial opportunity for manufacturers to pass on their cost changes to their clients may well disappear. The doors will slam shut, and that will be happening very, very soon. In fact, some food service operators might be looking for opportunities to start driving costs back down again. So this is the next phase of commercial arguments that we're going to see in the supply chain. Manufacturers trying to push through the last couple of phases of cost increase, and the clients becoming ever more resistant to allowing them to do that. So start planning for that now. The next watch out is around household wealth and prosperity. That's been under pressure for a long, long time. Most of us are seeing our incomes falling short of the cost of living. Real incomes have fallen quite sharply since the last HRC event, and they will fall again this year and probably fall again next year. It may be true that inflation is falling away, but most of us actually are going to continue to face pressure on our real incomes from taxes and from the cost of accommodation. Now, those people on the lowest incomes, of course, might be protected by changes to the living wage, changes to benefits, and so on. And of course, the people at the top are probably bomb-proof whatever happens. But the people in the middle, the squeezed middle, those are the people, those are the customers who are going to see the greatest pressures on their incomes. And that doesn't just affect some abstract group of strangers that we call diners or consumers or guests. Of course, it affects the people we work with, the people actively working in the supply chain, our own colleagues, in fact. In spite of everything, consumer financial confidence has flicked up a little bit in the last couple of months. So if you follow this line, you can see that consumers are less pessimistic about their financial future than they used to be, but they're still feeling fairly negative. Therefore, I think we can expect our consumers to stay in a very defensive posture as far as household spending is concerned. And when they're feeling defensive, of course, they're going to be looking for places that they can cut back their expenditure. And our own Shopper Vista data at IGD shows us the sort of things that our consumers anticipate doing. So when we ask consumers, where are you going to look for savings? They talk about a very broad strategy, looking for opportunities to retrench in almost everything that they do. However, eating out, which is... oh, there you go. No, laser's not working. Eating out, which is the orange bar on the left-hand side, is one of the most popular things that our consumers choose. So Kate said, when consumers have a bit more cash in their pockets, one of the first things they choose to spend it on is hospitality. But on the other hand, when things are very tight, that's also one of the first places they choose to cut back. Now, in view of what I said earlier, bear in mind that this is only anticipated behavior, and it may not be something that consumers actually choose to do in real life. But nevertheless, what this data is showing us is that cutting back eating out is one of the first things that springs to mind when times are very, very hard. So if you're a food service operator or a hospitality operator, you have to make the case for consumers to continue to spend and to allocate what might be very limited means to your business. The final watch out before I hand over to Nicola is around supply resilience. The last couple of years have shown us that the global food supply chain is probably a bit less robust than we would like to think. So we have to give thought to not only surviving this year, but actually to thriving in the year ahead. We have to build a food supply chain that really is solid and future fit. And there are three strands to this. We've got to find food for our diners to eat, we've got to find people to deliver the dining experience, and we have to think about resource efficiency. So if we start with food to serve, well, yes, partly it's an NPD challenge, and we'll see some fantastic NPD as we walk around the event today. But really, I think we should be putting the emphasis on logistics and supply sourcing. Amateurs think about the products, the professionals think about logistics. We know that food supply, for example, depends very, very heavily on good weather. The salad shortage has shown us that very, very clearly. But as we look ahead to an era of climate change, it's clear that harvests might be becoming less reliable rather than more reliable. So product ranges, food supply chains have to be built with unreliable harvests in mind. We also have to think about smooth movement of goods over borders. For us in the UK, Tom hopefully is going to help enormously. But we're also seeing this rising tide of trade protectionism, not just here, but around the world. If food runs short, well, of course, governments are going to talk about feeding their own people and not supplying us here in the UK. And who knows, perhaps in future, national self-sufficiency in food might well come back into vogue. Next, something else that Kate pointed out, which is this people problem. We need people to deliver that eating out experience as far as our consumers are concerned. And the fact is that the food supply chain in this country has people problems at every level. We're probably about 500,000 people short of complement. We need to find probably at least one person for every 8 currently serving in the supply chain. Not just a problem here, of course, but it's a problem across Europe. The workforce of Europe has already peaked and is starting to decline. Now, governments might be able to help to a degree. They can do things like loosening up migration policy, make it easier to move people into work. But realistically, I think food businesses are going to have to help themselves. And therefore, we have to have some very difficult conversations about pay. Unfortunately, let's be frank, pay in UK food service and hospitality is generally pretty low. And that's what we're seeing on here. This is ONS data for pay in UK food service. The blue line is the median, and the 2 lower lines show pay in entry-level roles. So we can see that pay is not only fairly low, it's also fairly flat. When you account for inflation, pay has not moved in almost a decade. And that is quite strange, isn't it? Because I've come to events like this one for many, many years, and every time I've heard people representing food businesses complaining about a lack of people. You would expect that pay would go up, but it hasn't, which is kind of counterintuitive. But I don't think this can go on indefinitely. Given the rising living costs our workers are facing, given the persistent shortage of workers, I think things are going to come to a head. I think pay is going to have to go up significantly and permanently within the near future. Delivering that is not easy, particularly in an incredibly labour-intensive industry like food service and hospitality. Higher wages inevitably mean higher prices for our clients. But without them, without higher pay, there'd be no one to deliver the experience anyway. Really, the only way you can break that paradox is to drive productivity. If you drive productivity, you might be able to give people better pay without necessarily driving higher prices for consumers. Unfortunately, as you can see here, productivity for food service in the UK is basically flat again. It's been very, very difficult to achieve those productivity gains, but perhaps the technology is now maturing. And again, fantastic opportunity to walk around the event here today and see what new technologies and what new automation is coming along. Finally, we need to think about what's going to happen to waste. Waste within the supply chain and waste in the post-consumer phase. Legislative pressure on this is tightening all the time. New regulations appearing every single day. And the government probably going to continue developing that agenda as time goes on. Not many businesses can do the work that is necessary on their own. But the good news is that people like the Competition and Markets Authority, the CMA, have actually come out and said it is okay to collaborate on sustainability. And of course, IGD offers a free suite of materials to help you start off that efficiency journey. So do look out for what we have on food waste and packaging waste. So I've said more than enough. I've covered some reasons for optimism there. So supply chain improvement, commodity prices and demand resilience, but also issued a few watch-outs. So I'm going to hand over now to Nicola, who's going to talk about how businesses around the world are tackling some of those issues. Nicola Knight.
Thanks, James. Hi, can everybody hear me? Great. Lovely to see you here again this year at HRC. I missed last year speaking with James because I had COVID. So thankfully this year, COVID-free, very happy to be here. So just to let you know, it's quite a small screen, but at the end of my presentation, James and I have supplied our email addresses, and you can email us to get a copy of the slides. The team here at HRC are recording the session, and that will include the slides. So don't worry if you can't see all the details on here, but I'll try and talk you through it. So James has given us a fantastic overview of some of the challenges and opportunities impacting the UK food service industry at the moment. Now, a lot of those challenges and opportunities are shared by many markets around the world. So what I'm going to do is take you on a whistle-stop tour of lots of different international best-in-class operators to show you what you can kind of think about for your businesses. So if you're an operator, some ideas for overcoming some of the challenges, making the most of the opportunities your business is facing. If you're a manufacturer or wholesaler, these are kinds of things that you can be discussing with your customers. So, right, let's begin our journey. So this information I'm going to pass on to you today is collected from all the travelling that our IGD analysts do every year. So last year, across the team, we visited 21 countries and took around about 45,000 photos of retail and food service businesses to try and bring to our customers the best of what is going on around the world and provide inspiration and innovation. So I'm going to talk about the exciting things that are happening and how they can be applied to the UK food service industry by looking at our 5 trends that we've identified this year that are driving forward the hospitality industry here. So we'll start off first with the new value equation. Now, of course, everyone's talking about value at the moment during this cost of living crisis. But value isn't as simple as just being cheap. It's about a trade-off between what consumers want and what they're prepared to pay for something versus what they get for that amount of investment. So what we'll look at here is some examples of how hospitality businesses are providing value to their customers by not necessarily cutting the pricing, because we know with higher increased costs, that's going to be very difficult to do. So the first example I've got is very, very simple. And as I go through all these examples on our whistle-top tour, some of them will be very simple that you can apply today. Some of them will be a little bit more aspirational, but will hopefully get you thinking about what is possible. And this is a very simple example of a French QSR chain. They are the 4th biggest in France, and they're growing very rapidly at the moment. They're called Flunch. And what they do is try to avoid their customers having bill shock. And by bill shock, we mean picking some products, getting to the till, and finding you've actually spent a little bit more than you thought you were going to. So when people are balancing off value versus what they get for their money, a shock when they come to pay is not what you want to be giving them. So Flunch actually give a different discount every single day of the month for those customers to keep them coming back and provide them some certainty around some of the products that they're going to be buying from them. So this is something we've seen growing in the UK in things like meal deals and set menus. So think about, when you're looking at your businesses, think about that bill shock. We know that prices are going up, but we want to give consumers something that they know what they're going to spend, so to help them budget. So think about those kind of deals, flexible deals throughout the week or the month, and then how that can help customers budget. Now we're going to look at something a little bit more sophisticated now, and that is the rise of digital loyalty schemes. So as businesses are competing for those customers that are being a bit more cautious about what they're spending, trying to drive footfall, trying to get them to spend a bit more, we've seen a huge rise in the UK in loyalty apps, most of them being digital. And in some recent research that we did is available to our subscribers on our retail analysis service, we found that over half of the people we spoke to had one or more hospitality loyalty schemes. So people have a lot of these schemes now in their digital wallets. And on the right there, you can see the most popular ones. So Costa is the most popular app for people to have on their smartphones. However, having the most subscribers or members isn't the key to a successful loyalty app. It's how often people use it. And actually the most used app is the Pret coffee subscription. So we'll have a little look at subscriptions in a second. But it just goes to show there's a balance there between getting people to sign up and then actually getting to use it. So how can operators try to make people use their app more than the others when it's getting so competitive? So we've seen KFC launch a really interesting digital loyalty app in the US, and it's come to the UK. And they've introduced gamification into the app. So when you go to order something across any of their channels, be that the drive-through, online, or at their counters, you get an instant game to play in a kind of retro arcade game style. So this provides something unique, something exciting, something unexpected every time you go in. And the gamification really appeals to their younger customer base. So this kind of extra sort of features on digital apps is something that we're seeing more of. This next example is from an American restaurant chain called Eureka. And with their digital loyalty app, they have different levels there. So they're rewarding their most loyal customers the most. And they have some really interesting features as well. So you can get things like goodie bags, you can get extra happy hour cocktails and things like that if you become a more loyal member. So think about how you can kind of incentivize your most loyal customers to keep on coming back more often. And as I mentioned earlier, subscriptions can really help to lock in that loyalty and make people use that loyalty scheme more often. Pret is the most widely used service. And here we can see in our research data that actually subscription really does increase the chances of people coming back and using the app more and visiting the store more and also spending more money when they're there. So there's an opportunity to use the data harnessed from these digital loyalty schemes to feed into for more targeted promotions and communications and encourage that uptrade as well. But the thing we've noticed and our research told us was that actually you have to give genuine rewards in loyalty schemes or else they just lose their impact. So one of the ways that Panera, who is Pret's sister company in the US, is adding value to its subscription service is by broadening the number of drinks that are available. So their coffee subscription launched in 2020 and is kind of the precursor of Pret's coffee subscription. Last year, they've extended the range of drinks now to encompass all of their cold drinks. And also, they've launched another level of subscription where you can buy a whole year's worth of subscription for $199. So it's effectively 12 months for the price of 10. So again, rewarding their most loyal subscribers if they pay up front. So this could be the kind of thing that we see coming now into some of the subscription programs that are becoming more appealing in the UK. So this could be something that Pret look to do this year. Final example when it comes to loyalty, getting more footfall and getting people to spend more is this lovely example from our analysts that visited South Korea recently. Now, this chain of restaurants is called IGD Hot Pots. It's a really, really popular chain in South Korea. And what I love about their loyalty scheme is the little moments of joy, as they call it. And this is inspiration for any operator in the UK. It's thinking about the little things you can do to make that experience much more fun and enjoyable for your customers. So they have a whole range of things they do. So they give away things like free popcorn or free nibbles while you're waiting in the queue. These restaurants tend to get very busy and there's often a queue outside. They have a free prawn peeling service as well at your table. They give you little cards so you can play games and win free sides. When it's your birthday, if you're a loyalty club member, then you get a free fruit platter and a free cocktail. And also because hot pots tend to be quite a messy eat, they give away free hair ties as well to stop your hair getting in your hot pot. And finally, they also have a tiered loyalty scheme as well. So their most loyal customers are getting more back from them. So I think this is a lovely scheme for lots of different little things that operators can do to just make every visit a bit more special and a bit more engaging for customers. So when they are balancing up that value versus price value equation, you'll be at the forefront of their minds. So moving on from consumers having quite a tough time and having to watch how they spend their money to the operator side of things. And of course, as we've heard today from James and from Kate earlier, we all know that it's a pretty tough time for operators up there, with costs rising due to inflation, supply issues, and labour challenges. Not to mention all this activity they need to try and keep those customers coming back. So let's have a look at some of the innovative ways businesses around the world are dealing with these operational challenges. First of all, a lovely image here of a dish from one of New York's only 2 vegetarian Michelin-starred restaurants. It's called Dirt Candy, and they were really struggling to balance their rising costs and cash flow. So they have moved to completely fixed menus. So that's all they offer now, and it's a complete sellout. And their fixed menu enables them to plan further ahead, to reduce food wastage, to simplify the cooking processes for the staff, and to just be much more managed. So it gives them a much more predictable kind of process behind the scenes. And they've found that this simplification is really working for them. So simplification can be the first thing to take out some of that complexity and reduce some of the cost implications on the business. A bit of a less glamorous picture here now. This is in a Masonic Village care home. And they are looking to use tech in quite an unusual kind of location to make their systems more efficient behind the scenes, and to reduce some of the stresses and strains on their staff when they're finding it hard to employ as many staff as they need. And they've introduced 2 robot waiters into their care home. And I would love to give anyone a prize if they could guess what the names of these 2 lovely robots are. Well, for any fans out there of Line of Duty, they're called Mary and Joseph. And I'm just hoping that they get a third one and they call it the Wee Donkey, because that would make my day. But they're finding that actually robots in a care home is a great way of taking the pressure off staff that are really struggling to meet all the needs of their residents. And another rather unglamorous picture here is a new robot dishwasher service. And this is called Spotless. And in surveys, 33 out of 4 hospitality businesses said that they thought that dishwashing could be automated in the future. And this new robot, Spotless, is starting to do that, again, in hospitals, in care homes, and just starting to move into restaurants in the US. Now, using AI, it learns as it goes, it becomes more efficient, faster, and more thorough than its human counterparts. And again, when staff and labour challenges are something that we're facing at the moment, you can take some of those quite basic tasks away from the staff members, push them towards adding value to customer experience, and let the robots take over some of those basic tasks. If that's all a little bit high tech though, another example here from South Korea is how technology can be used quite simply to improve experience and again reduce the pressures on staff. So here you can see that little screen at the front of the restaurant here, and that just allows walk-in customers to come in, to add their details, and the tablet then will message them on their mobile phones when a table is ready. So it's really, really simple, but it means that customers aren't standing around waiting. They can go off and enjoy themselves, have a drink or do something else while their table is being prepared for them, but it doesn't need any staff to manage that. The staff, again, can go and add value to the whole customer experience, not stand there taking people's details or giving them buzzers, something like that. So it just uses the mobile phone, and it's really effective and efficient. And looking further over towards the east, South Korea in particular, we find that they are really about sort of speed and efficiency rather than service. So there's some great technical innovations coming through from that market. And a final one here on kind of managing costs. And we know that delivery is really important to many hospitality businesses now. But of course, with delivery, you need to have really good quality photography to make your offer stand out from all the competitors. But that can be really expensive. So Swipebee, an American company, have invented an AI generating image of a dish. They're using similar technology to the ChatGPT technology that you've probably heard so much about recently. And in this example here, they entered burger with blue cheese and bacon on a brown background. It found it a little bit tricky. So there's one version there that's probably quite appealing, the rest maybe not so. But it costs virtually nothing to set up that image. So, reducing costs of photography can be offset by some of these new uses of technology. So keep your eyes peeled for these kinds of things coming our way in the UK soon. So now we're moving on to looking at a trend that we're calling channels in flux. And this is about how consumer behaviour in the cost of living crisis is changing, and that is impacting how operators need to manage their businesses to follow this consumer behaviour and find some lower cost ways of servicing them, but also looking to tap into new locations as consumers aren't always in the same places they were before the pandemic. So first of all, we're going to have a look at a great new restaurant that's opened up in Vancouver. This is called Wildlight, and as you can see, it's a high-end upscale restaurant that offers kind of Californian West Coast cuisine, cocktails. It's got a fantastic bar area, and it really looks the business. But this has actually been set up by a retailer. Patterson Food Group in Vancouver have the site next door as an urban fare supermarket, and they have developed this entire restaurant concept themselves. So that shows how retailers are very, very keen to bring food service closer to their retail offering. They want to create excitement in the stores, they want to highlight their foodie credentials, and they want to create a point of differentiation against their competitors. Plus, they've got the space to play with. So we're seeing more and more retailers move into a food service arena. And we're seeing this already in the UK with Sainsbury's partnering with Beauparent Restaurants, Asda buying up companies such as Leon and bringing food markets into their supermarkets, and Morrison's launching their own version of Market Kitchen. So look out for more retailer and food service blurring coming our way this year. Now, contract caterers are one of the parts of the hospitality industry that has been most affected during the pandemic and continues to be affected, as workers haven't quite returned to offices in the same way they were before COVID. So they're looking at really efficient ways now to service varying flows of footfall. And this is an example from the Salt Lake City Convention Centre, where Sodexo have the contract catering contract. So instead of having counters with people trying to serve people coming out of events, coming out of sporting occasions, and those staff then sitting around quite quiet in the meantime, they have launched their first Just Walk Out store, offering grab and go food to attendees at those events at the convention centre. So it's staffless, so you just need people to replenish. You don't need people to serve. It's very efficient, and it can manage peak flows very quickly and easily as well. So contract caterers really looking at different types of technology and formats to offset some of the challenges they've seen since the pandemic. Now, we all know that delivery is a factor of pretty much all operators these days, and that's not going to go away. So now we're seeing more products designed specifically for delivery. So this is an example of Domino's in Germany that have launched a mini calzini range to maximise the opportunity from portable handheld snacks that are designed specifically for delivery. So we'll see more products being designed with delivery in mind. We'll also see new formats being designed with delivery in mind as well. So this is Taco Bell's Defy concept that launched in Minnesota last year. And it's really designed for drive-through and delivery. So it has an elevated kitchen with 4 drive-through lanes underneath, but only one of those is for a traditional drive-through. The other 3 are for order ahead, click and collect, and third-party delivery drivers to quickly go through and collect pre-ordered meals. So we'll see changes in format design that have adapted to suit the new ways that consumers are behaving since the pandemic. And the other part of the value equation that I spoke about is making sure that what people are spending with you, they are getting good value from that experience. And part of that is the experience itself. So when we have the competition from retailers trying to get people to eat more at home, entertain at home and so on, and we have the virtual world as well, more people staying at home and using their screens, playing online and so on, then getting people out and about, off their sofas, out of their homes is becoming increasingly tricky. So this is something that operators are starting to focus on more with some really unique and memorable concepts. So this is a restaurant called Adrenalin in Cologne in Germany. And they've patented the floating chair technology, where every 20 minutes, groups of 16 guests come and sit down in these floating chairs, and they are moved around room to room to have a different course and experience in each of the different rooms as they move around the whole space. So it's really immersive. It has its own sound system as well and background music. It has these huge screens so that you're really immersed in the area that you're seated in. And the whole experience is kind of quite memorable and very, very different. And they're talking about an international rollout now. So it's pretty expensive to attend, but it is something that is going to get a lot of social media interest. People are going to be talking about going to it. And it's definitely not something that can be easily replicated at home. We've all heard a lot about competitive socialising as well. And again, this is something that gets people out and about from their homes, socialising and doing something together. And the latest one that you might see coming to London soon is one called Pickleball. And it's a game, if you haven't heard of it, that is the most popular and fastest growing new sport in America for the last 3 years running. It has 4.5 million players in the States. And it's a cross between ping pong, badminton and tennis. So it's very, very easy to play. Also, I'm told, I haven't tried it out myself. And concepts like this are being set up that have 10 to 14 courts, usual kind of thing, lots of great food, lots of great drink, and a fun game that anyone can take part in to socialise over. So watch out for Camp Pickle, maybe coming to us sometime soon. And then the final example here is these have all been quite big, quite expensive things to replicate. But experience really comes down to attention to detail. And this is an example from a burger restaurant in Germany called Peter Pan. Have around about 40 sites throughout the country. And they've taken attention to detail to a new level, but it's something that every operator can learn from. So they've installed sensors throughout their restaurant in Germany that detects changes in temperature, in light and noise, and feeds back a report to staff so that they can go and tweak the temperature, light and sound levels around the restaurant to make sure that every customer has the most beneficial combination of those factors and their experience is absolutely perfect every time. Now, you might not want to be installing sensors in your restaurant, but I think you can definitely take some tips from that in thinking about every detail of the customer experience. And just another little image there, another exciting thing that Peter Pan are doing that I just want to share with you is having augmented reality menus. So you can scan the QR code on the menu and you can see, in this case, a floating burger to see what you can order. So again, just, dialing up the experience a little bit and making it a bit more memorable. So coming on to the last trend, which is investing for the future now. So a lot of the things we've talked about are maximising the opportunity that is available today and looking at how to tackle the challenges that businesses are facing today. However, at some point in time, the focus will shift from value and operational challenges. And businesses need to be prepared for that. So they still need to be forward-looking and investing for the future. So this is an example from Germany, where at the beginning of this year, they brought in legislation that meant everywhere that offers reusable packaging and takeaway cups, plates, bowls, and so on, has to also have an option to give customers reusable packaging. And they can't charge extra for that, but they can charge a deposit to encourage returns. So Burger King have partnered with a system that allows you to take their packaging and return it to a number of other brands and businesses. So sustainability is not going away. Interesting, it has dipped a little bit during the pandemic, but it's still something that we need to be prepared for. And this kind of legislation is something that we could see coming to the UK at some point in the future. Another growing trend is moving towards electronic vehicles and the impact that that has on how we kind of use forecourts and other places where we might be charging our cars. And Subway in the US has launched this range of Subway Oasis locations, where they actually make the experience for the person charging their car a lot more pleasurable by giving them Wi-Fi, canopies to sit under, offering them obviously the choice of Subway dishes as well. But it's something that they want to make a destination for EV charging. So people will be spending more time when they charge their cars than doing a normal fill up at a forecourt. So how can we make that experience a lot more pleasurable and bring hospitality into that as well? And one of the other evolutions that we're seeing at the moment is moving from meat substitute products towards more of plant-forward products when it comes to serving a vegan or vegetarian menu. So this example here is Chick-fil-A, and I think that really, to me, looks like it's a chicken burger, but actually it's cauliflower. And we'll be seeing more of these kind of plant-forward menu items appearing on menus this year. It's something that an operator that we know really well called Stem and Glory in London has been advocating. So if you get a chance to go and see them, they're just around the corner from Liverpool Street Station, and they have an amazing plant-forward menu. And a final example here, I wanted to leave you something really attractive to start your day. And this is a Spanish restaurant chain called Flax and Kale. And they're the first flexitarian restaurant that's been really leading the charge of healthy flexitarianism in Europe. They're looking to expand in London, Paris and Amsterdam. And again, they're bringing that kind of plant-forward, healthy, nutritious food to the fore. So look out for them coming to us soon. So hopefully that's given you a flavour of some of the opportunities that exist around the world that you can learn from and bring back to your businesses in the UK. It's a really exciting time for hospitality, and apart from all the innovation that I've shown you today, you're in a great place now to go and have a look out and gain some information from the exhibitors here. So I hope you enjoy your day at HRC. Thank you very much from James and I. Here are our email addresses if you would like to get a download of the slides that we've spoken through. And if you'd like to sign up to our weekly economics bulletin and monthly Eating Out and Food to Go newsletter to see all the latest research that we're releasing, please scan the QR code there and sign up. I think we'll hang around for a little bit now, James, to see if there are any questions. So please come and find us afterwards if there's anything you'd like to talk to us about. Enjoy your day. Thank you.